have maybe a good 15 or 20 minutes where I can knock out this video before the husband gets home and all hell breaks loose with the dogs and I go into my nighttime routine of having to fix dinner and all that stuff. There's just been a million things to do around the house today. Well, today and every day here lately, it seems. I've been trying to get these autism videos going for Autism Awareness Month, and it just seems like every time I go to outline them and try to film them, I just have a million other things to do I'm trying to get done. So this video, I only have one video to talk about. I only have one book to talk about in this video, Drawing Autism. This is like an art book, I guess you call it, put together by Jill Mullin, and it has a foreword by Temple Grandin. This book features artwork from people of all ages, really, from like small children, well, not small children. I think the youngest in here is maybe 10 or 12, I forget, but like preteen, teenager age to up to adulthood, middle age artists. Jill Mullin is a New York-based behavior analyst, and she explains in her intro essay that some years back her work brought her to this this one autistic man who I don't know if he was an artist like in the professional sense per se, but he was living in this group home with other people who had autism, and he just used art a lot to express himself, express his love of TV and movies and things like that. And she was just really taken with him and loved his personality. He seemed to have a joy of life about him that came through with his artwork. She learned a lot about him through his artwork, and it gave her the idea that maybe she could put a project together and seek out other artists across the world who had autism and see what their art said about them and their experiences with living with autism. So that's what this is. This edition is actually the second printing. There was one that I think came out, I forget when this one came out. This one came out in 2014. I think it says the first edition came out in 2009. She breaks it down into a few different sections. Let me look here. Like it gives you a breakdown where, like for example, she has a section called "From Getting From Here to There," where it collects all the works that have to do with a love of transportation. I've read a lot of cases of autistic people having a fascination with trains or other types of public transport, so that would be in there. There's also the characteristic of having a lot of repetitive behaviors. So there's one in here called repetition, repetition, repetition. Interaction, individual and societal. That has to do with artwork that expresses how the artists are feeling from a societal point of view. A lot of the work illustrates feelings of isolation, being misunderstood, frustration at not being able to get their thoughts across to someone who doesn't have autism. All those things are going to be in that section. There's one in here called "It's All History" for artists that have a love of history and want to illustrate that. Bird's Eye View, I think, has to do with nature scenes. And then there's also one called "Art for Art's Sake," where she said that's the area where there's no specific deep meaning to a lot of the pieces there. It's just what they put together because it made them happy. So there's a lot of different sections in there. She says she breaks it down that way so that you can see the different aspects of autism a little bit more clearly. The thing with autism that a lot of people like to point out is that while you can be on the spectrum, there is no one straightforward case that says, yes, this is the way autism looks. Every individual is different, but there are key characteristics, obviously, that doctors and behavioralists and people in the medical field look for to determine whether you have it or not. So I did like that she broke it down like that, so it makes it clear for people that don't have it, that want to understand it. There's also a section in the back, if you find particular artists you like, there's little artist bio blurbs in the back. The artist bios aren't real in depth, but Jill Mullin does give you, when it's possible, gives you websites and like art houses that are supporting these artists if you want to find out more about them. So I thought I would just share a little bit from Jill's intro essay here to give you an idea of the idea behind this book. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's one portion in here that says, because of the increase in diagnosis over recent years, autism spectrum disorder has experienced increased media attention. Films, TV shows, books, magazines, newspaper articles have all examined the disability in order to increase autism awareness, explore current research in epidemiology, and to examine daily living of individuals affected by the disorder. Because ASD is a spectrum disorder, disabilities as well as talents can vary from individual to individual. Commonly in the media, individuals with autism have been shown to have great talents in certain areas such as science and math, but the intention of this book is to display another area where individuals with autism can have great abilities. Fostering and nurturing abilities despite a diagnosis can help individuals with ASD discover their talents. And then she goes on to talk about how the idea for this came about, and she says, drawing autism began with an artist named Glenn Russ. At an early age, Glenn developed a passion for music and drawing and was also diagnosed with autism. I met Glenn at a residential group home in New York City where he lived with 5 other men with varying disabilities. During the first 2 years I worked with Glenn, every week he would draw many pictures of his favorite bands like the Jackson 5, the Temptations, and the Whispers. His stylistic stick figures depicting the bands were drawn singing, dancing, or playing instruments as if they were caught in a snapshot from the Ed Sullivan Show. For 2 years I cheered Glenn on. Every day that I saw him I asked, "Did you draw any pictures today?" And if he had, he would display his work proudly. Often the drawings from the day would be held together with numerous staples variously deployed across the paper. Each day that I saw Glenn's drawings, I would ask, "Can I take one home with me?" He would shrug his shoulders and reply, no. And so the scene played out for 2 years until one day Glenn finally answered, "Why, yes, you can have it." I was delighted. I put the drawing on my refrigerator for family and friends to enjoy. While Glenn's art was displayed in the fine art gallery, otherwise known as my kitchen, I had many casual observers comment on it. Guests who had passed through my home inevitably remarked on the unique images and asked about the artist and his inspirations. Their questions sparked my interest to look into other artists with autism, as it became clear to me that there must be others with a unique perspective as well. The purpose of drawing autism is to provide visual clues as to how the individuals featured in this book, only a sampling of autistic people, interact and react to the world. And then she goes on to explain her thought process behind breaking down the images. But this is an example of Glenn Russ's work when she was talking about the Temptations and the Jackson 5. There's also a foreword in this book by Temple Grandin, perhaps one of the most famous autistic people in the world right now. If you're not familiar with her work, she designed... how to quickly explain this. She studied animal husbandry in college, and one of her projects took her to a meatpacking facility. And she herself is vegetarian, but she came up with this idea that it didn't seem like the meat industry was going to go anywhere anytime soon. There were just too many people that want to keep being meat eaters. So she said, if you have to do it, if it's not going to go anywhere, we can at least make it more humane than the way it was when she was in school. So she designed these systems for making the process of meat processing less traumatic for the animals. More humane deaths. So this is just one example of what she came up with. So she does the foreword in this book. And if you're not familiar with her story, a quick overview, I would recommend reading her writings, but because she is a fascinating person to read about. And she has like half a dozen books out, I think, just under her name, not to mention the biographies that have been done about her. But if you want just sort of like a Cliff's Notes version, quickly immerse yourself in her story, Claire Danes did a movie where she played Temple Grandin that, even though I'm not a big fan of Claire Danes, I did really like that movie. So she's in here. Some of the artwork in here does get a little bit dark, a little bit gritty. Some of it is a a little bit explicit as far as there is some nudity involved, which if you're sensitive to that and you look at the paintings just as the paintings, you might have a little bit of shock value. But one of the things that I found really helpful in this book was Jill Mullin put together a collection of interview questions that she submitted to each artist and asked them to answer when it came to their work. If they were nonverbal autistics, then she had like a parent or a guardian, spouse, somebody like that, answer for them. And she took the most interesting or the most revealing questions about each artist and included them in next to the painting. So if you find that some of them to be a little bit gritty, a little bit dark, a little disturbing, I would recommend reading the essay questions, because a lot of times those questions explain why the paintings are that. A lot of times there's a pretty intense story of hurt behind why the work looks like that. So I would just noting that to as a way to say give it a chance. This is the first painting that follows Jill Mullin's essay, which I was just blown away by this. When you look at this painting, like, it's one of those that might not come across on screen, but it's one of those ones that, like, the longer you look at it, the more variety of emotions you seem to pick up in it. Like, sometimes it's just looks like a face, and then other times you start to see more in the eyes. So I really liked that one, and I thought I would just share a few others in here that stood out to me. There's one in here called Metaphorical Maze by Rachel Marx that stood out to me simply because it's this maze of different phrases and images, and they're all sort of jumbled up, just different lines of text and thought that are intersecting. And it just, you know, like a maze, when you take it from a distance, it kind of looks like a mess, and you're not sure where the way out is, and all these thoughts are kind of running together. And I don't know, this one just kind of spoke to me because it made me think of, like, I have days where my own mind feels like this, where I have too many things that are intersecting and I can't make sense of which direction to go. So I really liked that one. Sean Ballinger is an artist that's featured a lot in here. One of the things that Jill Mullins mentions in her essay in the beginning is that after this project came out and it got worldwide attention, a lot of the artists featured in here, they weren't professional artists before this book came out, but they got approached so much after the fact that a lot of them went on to have professional artistic careers and do showings all over the world and stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. But Sean Ballinger, she explains, is his form of autism is largely nonverbal. He can communicate a little bit, but most of what we know about him as a person is through his mom's interpretation. But I really liked his work. I don't know, it struck me as a little bit folksy, but there's a lot of color, and there seems to be a lot of love of life. But he's in here a lot. Some of his pieces are also a little bit darker, but again, they explain why. This one struck me as really sad. The question under here said, what was the inspiration for this piece? And the artist said, on May 8, 2008, my nephew Ben and my niece Sonia died in a fire. I was very sad and desperate. Because I didn't have words to express my despair, I drew this werewolf. I dedicated my drawing to Ben and Sonia. So yeah, when I read the story behind that one, I was like, wow. I just can't imagine. I think this one, they were inspired by just a documentary and just wanted to capture the colors and the variety of the animal documentary. There's some more of Sean Ballinger's work. Does a lot of nature scenes, a lot of people working in fields. This is, if you saw on the cover, this is the full piece cover. It's a lot of birds. They explain in the essay questions on the side. The artist, David Barth, they got an answer to the essay questions from his mother. And she said, like many autistic people, David has obsessions. His drawings often represent his current obsessions. And in this attachment I sent you, it's not hard to guess what keeps him busy right now. There are almost 400 birds on this painting, and he knows the names and Latin names of most of them. And then there was an answer from David himself, where the question said, do you think your art helps others understand how you view the world? And he said, sometimes it does. When I draw situations, people understand that the animal in the drawing is me. Sometimes, though, my drawings make the distance between me and the outside world bigger, because the objects of my fascination are not always socially acceptable. Vampires, war scenes, etc. One of my favorite sections in here is Bird's Eye View, which is the nature-themed ones, just because the detail in this fall forest scene. But the one that really struck me in this one was, I think it's on, well, I thought it was on the next page. I'll get to it in a minute. But there was also this one, which at first glance might not look like much, but when I first looked at this, I was like, oh, it's a nice night scene of windows, like when you're walking down the street and you see windows lit up at night, which is always one of my favorite things when I'm walking around at night. I'm always fascinated by just the glow of houses. I just kind of picked up on that without even looking at the caption, and then down below it says, again, it was answered by the artist's mother. It says, near Verinda's home there are apartments and a temple, the slanting roof that she likes, and she likes how these look at night because of the lights. She says the houses have lights on in this painting, and there are shadows of people in one of the windows. Okay, this was the one I was talking about that really struck me in the nature one. This is a snowy scene in the forest, but like, look at the shadow detail and the colors of the sky. This is one of those moments where the camera doesn't really do it justice, but there's so much variation in that color in the sky that I just loved that. This, I think, was hands down my favorite painting in the book. This is called The Death of Love, number 373, and he explains the 373 part in here. The artist has a fascination with numbers, but yeah, this is one of those ones I just could not stop looking at. It just amazed me. Love that one. Art for art's sake is a really fun section because, like I said, they explain that there's not necessarily deep meaning behind them or a lot of darkness necessarily. It's just where they put the paintings that are just fun or something they wanted to do for somebody they loved or something like that. So there's one in here called Farm Kitties by Shelby Ray McSweeney, and she writes, I painted farm kitties for my mom because she missed her husband, my pop. He was from West Virginia and they would take trips there. I love painting and drawing all kinds of cats and kittens, and I want to make my art to make people happy. But it's kind of like a cute, folksy, almost like American Gothic, but with cats. Yeah, I loved that. This one, it was another one in Art for Art's Sake, which is like the artist painted herself in a dryer and then her friends in the window. That was really unique. And they asked her to explain this, and she said, I love my friends from the art center and choir, and I thought it would be fun to put them in a washing machine. And they asked her, well, how do you think of these ideas? And she's like, it just comes to me. I just think of an idea. And they asked, do you think your art helps others understand how you view the world? She said, yes, especially my sense of humor. I love that. It almost reminded me of like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or something. I thought that was cool. And I think I had one more I was going to show you guys in here. Yeah, there's one that's like a little bit more surrealist, kind of a little more abstract. And this one I thought was cute because you might not get it at first. I mean, when I first looked at this, I saw this green part and I was like, is that a Ninja Turtle? But it turns out the artist, what was his name? Will Kerner, was inspired by the movie Pinocchio. The scene where the boys, did they drink something? Or I forget what it was, but the scene where all the naughty boys turn into donkeys. See, that's right there. It's supposed to be a donkey ear. So Pinocchio and the other boys he's with, when they all turn into donkeys. I'm like, wow, that's a really obscure reference, because that was like from my childhood. But yeah, I loved that. And I'm usually not big on like surrealist kind of art. I'm very much geared towards more realist type images. But I really liked that one. Yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of artist bios in the back. I will try to leave a link to this particular book if you want to find a copy of this. This book is a little bit pricey on most places I found online, but it is a really fun collection if you're building up your autism library. So just thought I would start with that, try to get these autism videos going. Hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.